Amina, please forgive us.
We were wrong. We judged you.
We never knew what you were carrying.
Please, say something.
Because at that moment, every person in the village is remembering the cruel things they once said. Every insult. Every rumor. Every laugh. Every judgment. And now it is too late. The rain continues to fall. The silence becomes unbearable. Then the mysterious woman finally speaks. One sentence. Just one. A sentence so powerful that several people immediately break down in tears. Before we begin, take a moment to tell us where you are watching from in the comments. We love seeing viewers from different cities, states, and countries join these stories. If you enjoy emotional movies filled with powerful life lessons, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Stay with us until the very end because this is not just a story about poverty, judgment, or survival. It is a story that will challenge the way you look at people. And when the final scene arrives, you may never judge someone by their appearance again without knowing the weight they're carrying. Every village has one person people talk about when they need a story to tell. In Ashton village, that person was Amina Williams. If a group of women gathered beneath the mango tree near the market, her name eventually found its way into the conversation. If men sat outside the local store discussing other people's lives, her name would be mentioned before sunset. Everyone seemed to have an opinion about her, despite knowing almost nothing about her. That girl never smiles, one woman said as she arranged tomatoes on her stall. She thinks she's better than everyone, another replied. A third woman laughed. Better? Look at her clothes. She's been wearing the same sandals for years. The women burst into laughter. Amina heard them. She always heard them. The village was small enough that gossip traveled faster than the wind. Still, she kept walking. The faded blue dress she wore had been washed so many times that its original color had almost disappeared. Her sandals were worn thin from years of walking dusty roads. Resting on her head was a tray of fresh corn she planned to roast later beside the roadside. She lowered her eyes and continued moving. Responding would change nothing. By the time most villagers woke up, Amina had already been walking for hours. She rose before dawn every morning. Long before the first rooster crowed, she was fetching water from the community borehole, preparing breakfast, washing clothes, and cleaning the small house where her family lived. Their home sat near the edge of the village, a weather-beaten structure with a leaking roof and cracked walls. Inside, her father, Robert Williams, lay on a narrow bed. 5 years earlier, a severe stroke had stolen much of his strength. The man who once worked tirelessly to provide for his family could now barely move without assistance. Amina, he called weakly. She immediately entered the room. Yes, Dad. I am sorry. The words surprised her. She sat beside him. What are you apologizing for? His eyes filled with pain. For becoming your burden. Amina gently adjusted his blanket. You are not my burden. But you should be living your own life. Amina forced a smile. My life is right here. Robert turned away, unable to hide his tears. Both of them knew the truth. At 24 years old, Amina should have been building a future. Instead, she spent her days fighting to keep her family afloat. In the next room, her younger brother Ethan and her sister Lily prepared for school. Good morning, Lily said brightly. Amina handed her a small piece of bread. Eat before you leave. What about you? Ethan asked. I already ate. The lie came easily. The truth was that there was not enough food for everyone. Amina had become skilled at pretending she wasn't hungry. As the children left for school, she watched them disappear down the dusty road and whispered a silent prayer that their lives would be different from hers. That afternoon, she sat beside her charcoal grill roasting corn beneath the blazing sun. Customers came and went. So did the comments. There goes the corn girl. Poor thing. She'll be doing this forever. Nobody wants to marry a roadside seller. Laughter followed. Amina quietly turned another ear of corn over the fire. Not once did she answer. Not once did she complain. Because while the village saw a poor young woman selling roasted corn, Amina was carrying battles nobody could see. And every day, she carried them alone. The hardest battles are often the ones nobody sees. Every morning, Amina left home with a smile for her younger brother and sister, but the moment she stepped onto the dusty village road, she carried worries heavy enough to crush her spirit. The little money she earned from selling roasted corn disappeared almost as quickly as it came. There were medicines for her father, school supplies for Ethan and Lily, food for the house, and countless unexpected expenses that seemed determined to keep her trapped in poverty. One evening, after counting her earnings beneath the weak glow of a kerosene lamp, Amina quietly divided the money into small piles. Medicine, school expenses, food. The final pile was almost empty. She stared at it for a long moment before pushing it aside. In the kitchen sat a small pot containing the last portion of rice. Amina scooped most of it onto 2 plates. "Eat while it's hot," she told Ethan and Lily. "What about you?" Lily asked. "I'm not hungry." The children accepted the answer. Her father did not. Robert watched silently as his daughter drank water and called it dinner. When the children had gone to bed, he spoke quietly. "You skipped another meal." Amina forced a laugh. "You worry too much." "Amina." The sadness in his voice made her look away. "You cannot keep doing this." She smiled gently. "As long as everyone else is eating, I'll be fine." But she wasn't fine. Later that night, after the household had fallen asleep, Amina opened a warm biology textbook she had borrowed from a former teacher. Exhaustion weighed heavily on her body. Her eyes burned from smoke and fatigue, yet she forced herself to read. Human anatomy. Basic patient care. Emergency response. Page after page. Her dream of becoming a nurse refused to die, even when reality gave her every reason to abandon it. Outside, darkness swallowed the village. Inside, a determined young woman fought sleep while studying a future she could not afford. A week later, she stopped near the village primary school on her way home from the market. Through the fence, she noticed a young boy sitting alone beneath a tree. His name was Noah. His uniform was old and torn. His face carried the sadness of a child trying not to cry. Amina approached him. "Why aren't you in class?" The boy lowered his head. "My mother couldn't pay my school fees." The answer struck a painful chord. Amina remembered that feeling. The shame. The helplessness. The fear of watching your future disappear. The next morning, she quietly visited the school office and paid Noah's outstanding fees using money she had been saving to replace her broken sandals. The headmaster stared at her in surprise. "You barely have enough for yourself." Amina smiled. "He needs it more." She left before anyone could ask questions. Unfortunately, kindness rarely attracted attention. Poverty always did. The villagers continued talking. If she worked harder, she wouldn't be struggling. Maybe she enjoys people pitying her. That girl has no future. Their words became sharper as time passed. Then came the day that hurt more than the others. A respectable farmer named Daniel had quietly admired Amina for years. Unlike the rest of the village, he saw her kindness. One afternoon, he approached his mother. "I want to marry Amina." The older woman's expression darkened instantly. "The corn seller. She's a good woman." Good women don't bring poverty into their husband's house. Daniel frowned. "You don't know her." "I know enough." The conversation ended there. The proposal never came. News traveled quickly. Soon the entire village was discussing it. Imagine choosing Amina. What would she contribute? Love doesn't buy food. Laughter followed. That evening, Amina heard every word while tending her charcoal grill. The humiliation stung. The rejection hurt. But she remained silent. She simply turned another ear of corn over the fire and continued walking. Because while the village saw failure when they looked at her, Amina refused to stop believing that her life could become something more. And somewhere deep inside, despite the hunger, the insults, and the disappointments, hope still refused to die. For years, Amina had lived with the fear that one day her father's condition would become worse. That fear arrived on a humid Thursday afternoon. The morning had begun like every other. She roasted corn beneath the scorching sun, greeted customers politely, and ignored the occasional cruel remark thrown her way. Business was slower than usual, and by late afternoon she had earned barely enough to buy dinner for the family. She was packing her remaining corn when Ethan came running down the road. His school uniform was covered in dust. His face was pale with panic. "Amina." She immediately dropped what she was doing. "What happened?" "It's Dad." The fear in his voice froze her blood. "He can't breathe properly." Amina did not wait for another word. She grabbed her things and ran. The journey home felt endless. Her heart pounded violently against her chest as terrifying possibilities raced through her mind. When she entered the house, she found Robert struggling for breath. His face glistened with sweat. One side of his body trembled uncontrollably. Lily sat beside him crying. "Dad keeps saying his chest hurts." Amina knelt immediately. "Dad, can you hear me?" Robert opened his eyes weakly. The pain in them frightened her. For a moment, she saw something she had never seen before. Fear. Not fear for himself. Fear for her. "Amina," he whispered. "Don't talk. Save your strength." His fingers tightened around her hand. "I'm sorry." Tears instantly filled her eyes. "Stop apologizing." But Robert continued. "I promised your mother I would take care of all of you." His voice cracked. "I failed." Amina felt something inside her breaking. "No, Dad. I did." "You didn't. I left everything on your shoulders." Amina looked away before he could see her crying. The truth was that some days she felt crushed beneath those shoulders. Some days she felt exhausted. Some days she wanted to scream. But she could never allow herself that luxury. There was too much depending on her. She wiped her face quickly. "We are taking you to the clinic." The problem was that she already knew they couldn't afford it. The little money she had earned that week was barely enough for food. The nearest clinic required payment before treatment. Yet doing nothing was not an option. Amina rushed to her small wooden box and counted every naira she possessed. The amount was devastatingly small. She searched through drawers, old bags, kitchen containers, every corner of the house. Nothing. When there was nowhere else to look, she quietly sat on the edge of her bed. For the first time in years, hopelessness overwhelmed her. The room felt smaller. The burden felt heavier. She buried her face in her hands. "What am I supposed to do?" she whispered. No answer came. Only silence. Outside, she could hear children laughing somewhere in the village. Life continued moving. Meanwhile, her world felt as though it was collapsing. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. It was Lily. The young girl sat beside her sister. Is Dad going to die? The question shattered what remained of Amina's composure. She pulled Lily into her arms. No. But what if he does? Amina closed her eyes. Every fear she carried seemed to gather in that moment. The fear of losing her father. The fear of failing her family. The fear of never escaping poverty. Yet as she looked at her younger sister's frightened face, she realized she had no choice. She could fall apart later. Right now, she had to keep going. Amina stood. She wiped away her tears. Then she reached for her tray of roasted corn. "Where are you going?" Lily asked. "Back to work." "You just came home." "I know." "Amina." She forced a smile. "We need money for Dad." As the sun began to set over Ashton village, Amina returned to the roadside. Her heart was breaking. Her father was suffering. Her future remained uncertain. But she stood beside her charcoal grill anyway, turning corn over the fire, fighting a battle nobody could see, refusing to give up. The following morning, Amina woke after barely 2 hours of sleep. Her father's condition had stabilized during the night, but the fear remained. Every few minutes she found herself checking on him, making sure his breathing was steady. By sunrise, she had already prepared breakfast, helped Robert take his medication, and sent Ethan and Lily to school. The exhaustion showed in her eyes. The determination showed everywhere else. She arrived at the village market carrying a fresh tray of corn. Fridays were usually the busiest days. Traders from neighboring communities filled the narrow pathways, customers crowded around stalls, and the air buzzed with voices competing for attention. For most people, it was an ordinary market day. For Amina, it was another opportunity to earn enough money to keep her family afloat. She had barely settled beside her charcoal grill when a familiar voice drifted toward her. "Look at her." A woman selling vegetables shook her head. "That girl works harder than anyone I know and still remains poor." Another trader laughed. "Maybe poverty likes her too much to live." Several people chuckled. Amina heard them. As always, she said nothing. She focused on roasting her corn. A customer approached and bought 2 pieces. Then another followed. Business was steady, though not exceptional. For the first time in days, she felt a small measure of hope. Then a scream shattered the rhythm of the market. "Help!" The crowd froze. Another voice followed. "Somebody help this child." People immediately began running toward the center of the market. Stalls were abandoned. Conversations stopped. Amina stood and looked toward the commotion. A young boy, no older than 10, lay motionless on the ground. His mother knelt beside him, crying hysterically. "Jacob, open your eyes." The crowd quickly formed a circle around them. Everyone was talking. Nobody was helping. "Bring water." "No, find him. Carry him home. Call somebody." Conflicting instructions came from every direction. Panic spread faster than reason. Amina's heart began racing. She pushed through the crowd. "Please move." Several villagers looked surprised. "What is she doing here?" "The corn seller wants to help." Ignoring them, Amina dropped to her knees beside the child. Years of caring for her father had taught her things most villagers did not know. Years of studying borrowed medical textbooks had taught her even more. She gently checked the boy's breathing. Then his pulse. The crowd watched silently. Amina's voice remained calm. "He has a pulse." The boy's mother grabbed her arm. "Please save my son. We need space." Amina looked around. Everybody moved back. Nobody moved. She raised her voice. "I said move back." The authority in her tone startled the crowd. Slowly, people obeyed. Amina loosened the boy's clothing around his neck and continued monitoring his breathing. Minutes felt like hours. The market became unnaturally quiet. Even the gossipers who usually mocked her now watched with nervous anticipation. Then the boy suddenly coughed. A sharp gasp swept through the crowd. His eyes fluttered open. His mother burst into tears. "Jacob!" The woman wrapped her arms around him, sobbing uncontrollably. Relief flooded the marketplace. For a moment, nobody spoke. People simply stared at Amina. The same woman they had laughed at. The same woman they called a failure. The same woman they dismissed every day. An elderly trader finally broke the silence. How did you know what to do? Amina stood slowly. Her clothes were dusty. Sweat lined her forehead. I've spent years caring for sick people. The answer was simple. But its impact was enormous. For the first time, the villagers looked at her differently. Not as the poor girl selling roasted corn. Not as the subject of gossip. But as someone capable. Someone intelligent. Someone they had completely misunderstood. And as whispers spread through the market, many people found themselves asking the same uncomfortable question. Who exactly was Amina Williams? News traveled through Ashton village faster than the Harmattan wind. By sunset, nearly everyone had heard about what happened in the market. Some versions of the story were exaggerated. Others were incomplete. Yet one detail remained the same in every retelling. Amina Williams had saved a child's life. The same people who once gathered beneath trees to mock her now gathered to discuss her with an entirely different tone. Did you hear what happened? I was there. They said the boy wasn't breathing properly. And Amina knew exactly what to do. The conversation spread from the market to the village well, from family compounds to evening gatherings. For the first time in years, people were asking questions they had never cared to ask before. Where had Amina learned those skills? Why did she know so much about medicine? How had they never noticed? The answers began emerging slowly. The first revelation came from Mr. Harrison, Amina's former secondary school teacher. He happened to overhear villagers discussing the incident outside a small shop. One man shook his head in disbelief. I still don't understand how a corn seller knew all that. Mr. Harrison frowned. A corn seller. The men looked at him. That's what she does. No, Mr. Harrison replied quietly. That's how she survives. The distinction immediately caught their attention. The elderly teacher continued. Before her mother's death, Amina was one of the brightest students I ever taught. She wanted to become a nurse. In fact, she probably would have achieved it by now if life hadn't interrupted her plans. The men exchanged glances. They had never heard this before. Mr. Harrison sighed. While your children were sleeping, that girl was studying. While others complained about small problems, she was carrying responsibilities that would break many adults. The conversation left them unsettled. The next revelation came from the village pharmacist. Several women were discussing Amina when he interrupted. Do you know how often she comes here? One woman shrugged. For her father, I suppose. The pharmacist nodded. For years. She memorized every medication he needed. She learned the symptoms. She learned emergency responses. Sometimes she asked questions that even surprised me. The women fell silent. Their image of Amina was beginning to crack. Then came another discovery. The headmaster of the village school revealed that Amina had quietly paid Noah's overdue school fees months earlier. The story shocked everyone. She paid for another child's education. But she's poor herself. Why would she do that? No one had an answer. By the following week, people were uncovering pieces of Amina's life they had never bothered to see. They learned she often skipped meals. They learned she worked from before sunrise until late at night. They learned she used borrowed textbooks to continue studying medicine in secret. They learned that much of her income disappeared into hospital bills, school expenses, and household needs. With every new truth, old gossip became harder to defend. The laughter that once followed her began disappearing. The jokes no longer sounded funny. The insults no longer felt harmless. Instead, they returned as uncomfortable memories. One afternoon, A woman named Margaret sat quietly outside her home remembering all the cruel remarks she had made over the years. Another villager, Samuel, remembered mocking Amina's worn clothing in front of others. Even Daniel's mother found herself unable to sleep after learning the sacrifices Amina had made for her family. For the first time, many villagers were forced to confront a painful reality. They had judged a story they never understood. And the more they learned about Amina Williams, the more ashamed they became of the people they had been. Meanwhile, unaware of the conversation spreading through the village, Amina continued doing what she had always done. She woke before dawn. She cared for her father. She supported her siblings. She roasted corn by the roadside. And she carried on as though nothing had changed. But something had changed. For the first time, the village was beginning to see her. For years, opportunity had always seemed to stop just short of Amina's reach. Whenever she took one step forward, life pushed her 2 steps back. Yet sometimes the smallest moments create the biggest changes. 3 weeks after the incident in the market, a visitor arrived at Ashton village. Her name was Rebecca Carter, a representative from a charitable foundation that sponsored young people pursuing careers in healthcare. She had originally come to the village for a community outreach program, but before she even completed her first day, she heard Amina's name several times. The stories intrigued her. A young woman who cared for a disabled father. A young woman who educated herself using borrowed textbooks. A young woman who saved a child's life despite never attending medical school. Rebecca wanted to meet her. She found Amina exactly where everyone said she would be. Standing beside her charcoal grill. Roasting corn. Walking. Rebecca approached with a smile. "Are you Amina Williams?" Amina looked up. "Yes. I've heard a lot about you." Amina almost laughed. Most of her life, hearing that sentence usually meant trouble. This time felt different. Over the next hour, Rebecca asked questions. Amina answered honestly. She spoke about her father's stroke, her mother's death, her siblings, the dreams she had postponed, the textbooks she studied at night. The more Rebecca listened, the more impressed she became. Finally, she asked the question Amina never expected to hear. If someone offered to pay for nursing school, would you go? For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Amina stared at her. Certain she had heard wrong. Nursing school. Rebecca nodded. Yes. The words felt impossible. Like a dream she had buried years ago. Amina swallowed hard. I would go. Her voice trembled slightly. I would go tomorrow. Rebecca smiled. Good. Amina's heart pounded. Good. Our foundation has a scholarship program. Silence. Then another silence. Amina could barely process what she was hearing. We are looking for people with character, resilience, and potential, Rebecca continued. From everything I've learned, you possess all three. Tears immediately filled Amina's eyes. Not because she wanted sympathy. Because after years of carrying impossible burdens, someone had finally seen her. Not her poverty. Not her struggles. When the scholarship approval arrived weeks later, the news spread throughout Ashton village. The reaction was immediate. People celebrated. People congratulated her. But beneath the excitement lived another emotion. Regret. Deep regret. Margaret remembered laughing at Amina's clothes. Samuel remembered mocking her roadside business. Others remembered countless cruel comments they could never take back. The village that once treated her like a failure now proudly claimed her as one of their own. The irony was impossible to ignore. One evening, Daniel's mother approached Amina while she packed her things after work. For several moments, the older woman struggled to find the words. Finally she spoke. I owe you an apology. Amina looked surprised. For what? The woman lowered her eyes. For judging you. The honesty caught Amina off guard. The older woman continued. I thought poverty defined who you were. Emotion filled her voice. I was wrong. Amina smiled gently. The same gentle smile she had carried through years of insults. It's okay. No, the woman said quietly. It isn't. As nursing school drew closer, more apologies followed. Some direct. Some indirect. Some spoken. Others expressed through acts of kindness. The village was beginning to understand a lesson many wished they had learned sooner. Character is not measured by wealth. Strength is not measured by appearance. And sometimes the person standing quietly beside the road is carrying more courage than anyone else in the community. Soon, Amina would leave Ashton village to begin the journey she had dreamed about for years. But before she left, the entire village found itself facing an uncomfortable truth. They had spent years judging a woman they never truly knew. 5 years later, Ashton village looked much the same. The dusty road still stretched between family compounds. Children still chased one another through open fields. Women still gathered beneath the old mango tree near the market. Life continued with its familiar rhythm. Yet one thing had changed. Whenever people spoke about Amina Williams, they no longer lowered their voices in mockery. They spoke her name with pride. The girl they once called the corn seller had become Nurse Amina Williams. The young woman they had dismissed as a failure now worked at one of the region's largest hospitals, where patients often requested her by name. Her compassion had become as well known as her skill. She treated wealthy businessmen and poor laborers with the same kindness. To Amina, every patient mattered because she knew what it felt like when life left people feeling invisible. Her father was healthier than anyone had imagined possible. Though age had slowed him, proper treatment and care had improved his quality of life. Ethan was studying engineering at a university, while Lily was preparing for her final secondary school examinations. The family that once struggled to survive had finally found stability. One afternoon, a letter arrived at the hospital where Amina worked. It came from Ashton village. The village council was organizing a community celebration and wanted to honor her achievements. At first, Amina hesitated. The invitation stirred old memories. Painful memories. The laughter. The insults. The judgment. Yet as she thought about it, she realized something important. She had spent years moving forward. She refused to spend the rest of her life looking backward. So she accepted. The day of the celebration arrived beneath dark clouds. Villagers gathered in the central square early in the morning. Chairs were arranged in neat rows. Decorations hung from nearby buildings. The atmosphere felt festive. Then the rain began. At first it was light. Then it became heavy. Most people expected the event to be postponed. Nobody moved. They stayed. When Amina's vehicle finally entered the village, hundreds of people were waiting despite the downpour. The sight stunned her. As she stepped out, applause erupted across the square. But something felt different. Something deeper than celebration. Many faces carried emotion. Others carried guilt. The village chief stepped forward holding a microphone. Rain soaked his clothing. His voice trembled. Amina Williams. The crowd fell silent. We invited you here today to celebrate your success. He paused. But there is something else we must do first. Amina looked around. Confusion slowly spread across her face. The elderly chief lowered his head. Then, to her complete shock, he apologized. Publicly. We failed you. A murmur moved through the crowd. The chief continued. When you were struggling, we judged you. His voice cracked. When you needed encouragement, we offered criticism. Several villagers began crying. A woman stepped forward. It was Margaret. The same woman who had mocked Amina's appearance years earlier. Tears streamed down her face. "I'm sorry." Another villager joined her. Then another. Then another. Within moments, dozens of people stood before Amina. Some crying openly. Some unable to meet her eyes. The rain continued falling. Nobody cared. Samuel wiped tears from his face. "I laughed at you." Daniel's mother stepped forward next. "I thought poverty defined your worth." More villagers followed. One after another. Confessions. Apologies. Regret. Years of guilt poured into the open. The entire square became emotional. Many people were crying now. Not because Amina had become successful, but because they finally understood how wrong they had been. Amina stood silently. The exact scene from years earlier. The same scene shown at the beginning of this story. The village gathered. People crying. People asking for forgiveness. For several moments, she said nothing. The crowd waited. The rain fell. The silence became almost unbearable. Finally, Amina stepped forward. There was no anger in her eyes. No bitterness. No desire for revenge. Only wisdom earned through years of struggle. She looked at the faces before her and spoke softly. "The easiest thing in the world is to judge someone." The crowd listened in complete silence. "The hardest thing is to carry what they carry and still keep going." Many villagers lowered their heads. Others wiped away fresh tears. Amina smiled gently. "I forgave you a long time ago." The words broke something inside the crowd. People wept openly. Not because they deserved forgiveness, but because they had received it. And in that rainy village square, everyone learned a lesson they would never forget. You never truly know the battles another person is fighting. The strongest people are often the ones suffering in silence. And sometimes, the person the world judges the most is carrying a story powerful enough to change every heart that hears it.